Hey there, lovely soul. Welcome back to Noah's Stories. Today's tale is one of loss, rain, and quiet miracles. It begins in a cemetery where two strangers, each carrying an infant and a broken heart, cross paths. But what follows isn't just a story of grief. It's about unexpected kindness, second chances, and the kind of love that grows quietly, day by day. So find a quiet spot, take a deep breath, and let's walk with them through the rain, toward something beautiful. Late afternoon in November, a thin veil of mist settled over the winding path of Ridge Hill Cemetery. The wildflowers along the edge had withered, leaving behind only the gray of earth and stone. Lena Brooks, wrapped in a thick black coat, cradled her newborn son Emmett as she gently pushed open the heavy iron gate with a creak. It had been exactly 1 month since her husband, Adam, had died during her labor. A sudden brain aneurysm stole his life just minutes before Emmett took his first breath. Since that moment, Lena had existed in a blur of diapers, feedings, and tears. Time had lost its meaning. Every night felt like a battle to survive. She stopped before a temporary headstone etched with his name, Adam Brooks, beloved husband and father. The words "father" felt like a cruel joke. He had held that title for only a few fleeting moments. Lena sank to the ground, carefully turning Emmett so his tiny face pointed toward the grave. "This is your daddy," she whispered. "You're so small but so strong." Suddenly, the cry of another baby pierced the quiet. Lena looked up and locked eyes with a man kneeling a few rows away. He held a baby girl wrapped in a pale pink blanket. Their eyes met, startled but silently understanding. Both bore the same hollow exhaustion, the same tear-reddened eyes, and between them, fresh graves and two infants unaware of all they had lost. As the rain began to fall in gentle drops, the man walked toward her, extending a handkerchief damp with tears. "I'm Ben," he said. "My wife. She died during childbirth, the same day." A month after her husband's death, Lena still hadn't returned to work. She had once been an elementary school music teacher, but now, changing diapers and trying to soothe Emmett consumed every ounce of energy she had left. She had been staying at her mother-in-law's home, Margot Brooks, a sophisticated and stern woman who had never fully accepted her. They had agreed she could stay, for a while, until she could get back on her feet. But on a bitterly cold, rainy afternoon, Lena returned from Emmett's doctor appointment to find her luggage neatly lined up at the base of the staircase. The same suitcases from their honeymoon, now damp and forgotten. "You need to leave," Margot said, her voice sharp, detached. "I've been more than generous. 1 month is enough." Lena stammered, trying to stay calm. "But I don't have anywhere to go yet." "That's not my concern," Margot cut her off. "You're a burden, your presence, and that child's is just a reminder of what I lost." Lena didn't even have tears left to cry. She picked up Emmett, stepped outside into the cold, and walked away from the house, unsure of her next step. The rain fell harder. She made her way to the nearest bus stop, sank down onto the freezing bench, and curled around her baby, trying to shield him with her shaking body. No one stopped, no sympathetic glances, just silence and rain. Until a gray SUV slowed to a stop beside the curb. The window rolled down, and a familiar face appeared. Ben. He parked, stepped out, and held an umbrella over her head. "Lena?" he asked, worry etched in his voice. "What are you doing out here?" She couldn't answer, she just bowed her head. Emmett began to wail in her arms. "Get in," Ben said firmly. "You can't sit out here like this. I'll take you home, my home. You'll be safe there." Lena hesitated, just for a second, but when she looked into Ben's eyes, she saw no judgment, no pity, only concern, and maybe something else. Hope. Ben's home sat about 10 minutes outside town, a renovated farmhouse surrounded by open fields and scattered trees. Large windows brought in natural light, though that day the world outside was nothing but rain and silence. Ben led Lena through the kitchen door, still holding a soaked umbrella. "You can stay in the guest room," he said gently. "It has a big bed, a private bathroom. I'll bring extra blankets. It's quiet out here." Lena only nodded, words of gratitude caught in her throat. She never imagined needing help from a stranger, someone she'd only met once in a cemetery. The first days in Ben's house passed slowly. They barely spoke, but the silence wasn't uncomfortable. During the day, Ben worked in his design studio out back, sketching architectural restorations. Lena cared for Emmett, tidying up the kitchen in an attempt to repay kindness. Sometimes they ate dinner together, their babies lying in bassinets nearby, occasionally crying in tandem. Lena and Ben took turns, holding, changing, feeding, no schedule, no expectations, just two people responding to the needs of their children. Some nights they met in the kitchen, dark circles under their eyes, hair a mess, cradling crying babies. Yet beneath the exhaustion, they slowly learned to recognize the other's presence as a kind of peace, quiet, unspoken, but grounding in the chaos of grief. Lena had told herself she'd leave once she found a new place, but after a week, watching Emmett sleep soundly beside Daisy, Ben's daughter, she wasn't so sure anymore. Maybe this place wasn't just temporary. The town Ben lived in wasn't big, the kind where familiar names quickly became morning coffee gossip. Lena knew that. She had once taught music at the local elementary school, where everyone knew everyone. But she hadn't expected that only weeks after moving into Ben's home, the whispers would spread so fast. At the grocery store, she caught wary glances from former acquaintances. At the pharmacy, she overheard her name between two housewives. They didn't speak loudly, but enough for Lena to know she was being talked about. They said she was too fast, hadn't even grieved properly, already living with a man. No one mentioned being cast out into the rain. No one saw the sleepless nights or the times Ben changed Emmett's diaper when she was too drained to stand. The gossip reached Margot quickly. One afternoon, just as Lena had put Emmett down for a nap, she received a letter from a law firm. Margot, her former mother-in-law, was formally petitioning for visitation rights to her grandson, claiming the child's current living situation was unsuitable. Lena froze. The petition accused her of being emotionally unstable, morally questionable, and a harmful influence on a developing child. The words stung, like erasing every effort she'd made to hold it all together, to raise Emmett in safety and peace. Ben didn't say much when she told him. Then he picked up his phone and called someone, a family law attorney he'd worked with before. "We'll face this," he said, placing a steady hand on her shoulder. "You're not alone. We'll fight for Emmett. And for Daisy, too." The next day, they met the attorney, a sharp but compassionate woman who listened without judgment as they laid out everything. She reviewed the documents, then nodded. "You don't just have a chance, you have truth on your side." The courtroom was small but solemn. Lena sat silently beside Ben, clutching a thin silk scarf, the last gift from Adam. Behind them, Margot sat upright, her posture rigid and cold, flanked by a high-prize attorney in a tailored suit. The tension in the room was palpable, but beside her, Ben remained calm, his gaze steady and forward. Their attorney spoke first, laying out the timeline, from the day Adam died to when Lena was forced out of her home just 1 month after the funeral. She presented evidence, text messages from Margot that read, "I can't bear to see you and that child another day." Catherine, their lawyer, spoke with clarity and conviction. This grandmother showed no concern when the child and his mother were put on the street. Her interest only began when she heard the boy was living with a widowed man. Margot took the stand. She maintained composure, insisting, "I only want what's best for my grandson." But when asked if she offered any help after evicting Lena, she paused, then replied, "I didn't think it was necessary." Then it was Lena's turn. Her voice trembled at first, but grew stronger with each word. She told them about that rainy afternoon sitting on a bench with her baby and about the man who brought her home, not out of obligation or familiarity, but simply because he saw someone who needed saving. "Ben didn't replace Adam," she said, "just as I didn't replace his wife. We're just trying to survive each day, and these two children, Emmett and Daisy, are the reason we keep moving forward." Ben stood next. His voice was low, deliberate. "We're not a convenience couple. We're two people who lost everything, and now we're rebuilding. From the smallest things, not out of need, but out of love." After the hearing, the judge gave her ruling Margot would have visitation twice a month, supervised at their home. But the petition for shared custody was denied. Lena held Ben's hand as they exited the courtroom. A breeze drifted through the hallway, brushing back her hair. For the first time in a long while, she exhaled. Slightly, like someone who had just stepped out of a storm. It was a quiet night after days of chaos. The babies had finally drifted into peaceful sleep, leaving the house in a rare, gentle silence. Lena walked into the kitchen and found Ben sitting alone at the table. 2 wooden boxes in front of him, one for Daisy, one for Emmett. "I thought we should keep everything we can," Ben said as she approached, "so that when they grow up, they won't just know their parents through a single photo." He was carefully arranging small items: a dried flower, faded photographs, movie stubs, a handkerchief that once belonged to Nora. Lena quietly reached into her fabric pouch and took out the few precious things she had left. Adam's fountain pen, a handwritten letter he'd written when he first found out she was pregnant, Emmett's ultrasound image. They didn't speak much, just took turns sharing stories, memories of those they'd lost, as if reintroducing pieces of their hearts, not to dwell in sorrow, but to ensure their children would know their parents had once lived, fully, lovingly, and never to be forgotten. "I'm afraid I'll forget her laugh," Ben whispered, "that someday I won't remember how Nora looked when she smiled." Lena nodded. "I'm afraid Emmett will grow up never knowing what Adam dreamed for him." When everything had been placed neatly into the boxes, they closed the lids together, carefully, as if sealing not the past, but something sacred meant to last. Ben turned, pressing a gentle kiss to Lena's forehead, not hurried, not heavy with meaning, just a simple gesture that told her something between them had quietly shifted. 1 year after that rainy afternoon at the cemetery, everything had changed. The backyard of the farmhouse was now bursting with spring colors. Emmett and Daisy, both nearly a year old, were toddling across the grass, tiny hands reaching for the sunlight. Ben was finishing the last bolt on a wooden swing set he'd built himself, while Lena sat on the porch steps, smiling as she watched the children's every move. The house was no longer a temporary shelter. It had become a home, filled with toys scattered across rooms, framed photos of 2 giggling toddlers on the walls, and the warm scent of cookies baking every weekend. Both sides of the family, even Margot, had begun to accept their reality. Visits were no longer tense, and at times, Margot even sat with Emmett for hours. No harsh words, only quiet presence. That evening, as the sun dipped low, Lena stood beside Ben in their memorial garden, a small patch they'd planted to honor Adam and Nora. The lavender swayed gently in the breeze, its scent soft, like a whisper from the past. Ben turned to her, his hand finding hers. "Lena," he said, voice steady and warm, "we've walked through grief and built something from the ashes. You, Emmett, Daisy, you're my family. Today I want to make that official." He knelt down, pulled out a simple ring, catching the last rays of golden light. "Will you marry me?" Tears filled Lena's eyes, but this time not from sorrow. She nodded without hesitation. 1 year ago, they met as broken strangers. Today, they stood as a healed family, born not despite the cracks, but through them. The wedding took place in late summer, right in the garden behind the farmhouse, the same space where Emmett and Daisy had taken their first steps. It wasn't grand or extravagant, just family, a few close friends, and golden sunlight cast gently over everything. Lena wore a simple white dress, her hair loosely tied with a soft blue ribbon. Ben waited beneath an arch of lavender they'd planted together, his eyes glowing with quiet tenderness. Emmett and Daisy, the tiniest ring bearer and flower girl, stumbled adorably with plush toys and flower hoops, filling the ceremony with laughter. Their vows weren't grand promises, just honesty. To face the calm and the storm, side by side. "We lost something to find each other," Ben said. "Now, I choose to love you, every day, as a new beginning." Even Margot was there, dressed in a muted lavender dress. She didn't say much, but when she kissed Emmett on the forehead and squeezed Lena's hand, Lena understood. It wasn't an apology, but it was peace. Ben woke early to make breakfast so Lena could sleep a little longer. He changed diapers, fed Daisy, then pulled both children into his lap for bedtime stories. Lena returned to teaching music part-time, while Ben adjusted his work hours to be present whenever needed. Married life wasn't loud, but it was full. Ben woke early to make breakfast so Lena could sleep a little longer. He changed diapers, fed Daisy, then pulled both children into his lap for bedtime stories. Lena returned to teaching music part-time, while Ben adjusted his work hours to be present whenever needed. He never tried to replace Adam. He simply did everything so Emmett would always feel fully loved. And Lena, after all the loss, finally lived inside a love that was calm, steady, and unconditional. A love that simply showed up every single day. It was a bright spring afternoon, sunlight spreading across the grounds of Ridge Hill Cemetery. Lena and Ben returned to where it all began, this time without tears or trembling. Emmett and Daisy, now walking, toddled side by side along the gravel path behind their parents. Both wore light jackets and clutched tiny flowers, a bundle of lavender for Nora, a white rose for Adam. With wobbling steps, Emmett gently dropped the white rose near Adam's grave, while Daisy babbled and patted the lavender bouquet onto the soft earth. No words were needed. The breeze carried children's laughter, rustling leaves, and memories that never faded. Ben squeezed Lena's hand, his eyes filled with gratitude. "I think they'd be proud," he said, "of what we've made it through, of how we carry their memory with love, not pain." Lena nodded. "And of these two little ones, the final gifts they left the world. As they left the cemetery, they didn't look down. They walked with shoulders lifted, hands clasped, children in arms, like the family they had become. Life would never return to what it once was, but it had become something else, just as beautiful, just as worthy. The grief hadn't disappeared, but it had softened, making room for love to grow. Exactly 1 year. Two strangers, once broken by loss, were now a family, bound by love, memory, and something entirely unplanned. And in the place where sorrow first met them, they left new footprints of hope, of healing, of something whole. This story began in the rain, with two strangers and two babies, and ended with a family built from love, loss, and healing. If it moved your heart the way it moved ours, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment and share which moment stayed with you most. And if you want more stories that remind us that hope can bloom even after heartbreak, subscribe to the channel and join our growing community. Until next time, stay gentle with your soul and with the ones you love.